Good morning, it's Ruben Lowing here in McAllen, Texas. This is Sunday morning. I'm here in Christian McAuliffe Memorial Park. And you can see the park. It's pretty wide open. It's got a nice little pond in the park. And walk past it. It's got muskrat in the pond. It's got there's ducks. You see chipmunks. Well, I haven't seen no rabbits. Oh yeah, chickens. Sometimes chickens are in here. It's kind of funny, right? But Stephen Smith out of Sarasota, Florida, asked me to contribute to his Sunrise Daybreaker podcast or Zoom every once in a while. And he explained to me that I got to be talking about the what's going on in the area. Okay, so it's getting cooler. This is going to be really interesting this year, because right about now, right around Thanksgiving, the winter Texans come down. So they come down, senior citizens come down here from Thanksgiving to Easter, and they fill up the mobile home parks, right? And I don't know how they're going to be this year with the COVID scare. My mom's talking about that, right? My mom's diabetic. Now she's got O-type blood, so people with O blood, positive or negative, my mom's O negative, they have a less risk from COVID because there's no sugar attached to O blood type. That's why they call it O. It was originally 0, meaning it had 0 sugar attached to it. The little hooks on the coronavirus attached to sugar. Ain't that something? Blood sugar. That's why. So people with O, I know a guy, he got it. He was O negative, had it for 3 days. That's it. His wife got it and she died. All right. So I don't wear a mask. It triggers my PTSD, and of course I don't like it. And most people around me don't like it because it makes me really aggressive. I get kind of hostile when I'm triggered. There's the pond right there. Let's see. I can get you into the pond. Can you see it? So they've shut down the border. Mexico closed the border, so Americans can't get in and spread COVID. How about that? Now it's open for the commerce, the trucking, the produce, right? A lot of produce comes across right here. This is where most of the produce gets processed, packaged, and sent out to Walmart and H-E-B and different places. This is a primary port for all the produce coming in from Mexico, and they supply a whole bunch of produce for the U.S. But here's what's really crazy. I'm from Michigan originally. Michigan and California are always like jockeying for first place for the production of produce, right? But Texas is right in there. But it's not really Texas. It's Mexico, coming across from Mexico. And what'll happen is the demand is the demand for food has gone off the hook. There's actually not enough food in the world to feed everybody. So all supply and demand, that means things are going to go up in price. Interesting. So you got to get, there's all kinds of interesting things going on. If you understand something, that after World War II, the big munitions producers that made bombs, they started taking, so they didn't go out of business because they used the nitrogen that they make for bombs and turn it into fertilizer. Dow, DuPont, Monsanto, Cargill, that's what they do. But that nitrogen is the wrong kind of nitrogen. It actually depletes the nutrients and the carbon out of the soil and affecting our food. So we have to eat 8 times more produce now to get the same nutrient content that we did 60 years ago. Hence the obesity problem in the United States. And that's the people that are in the greatest risk for COVID are those people who they're obese, pre-diabetic, diabetic, okay, but they're the way they are because of that situation. You've got to eat so much more food to get the right nutrients for your body, okay, but because you got to eat so much more food, okay, it causes obesity, okay, and it's a vicious cycle, right? And there's been a theory, and I'll put it out there, that these same people that make the fertilizer that reduces the amount of quality food that we can eat, right, are the same ones that make bombs. And the biggest reason people go to war is over food. Okay, so that's the whole, what Eisenhower talked about, the military-industrial complex. Okay, and it's tied in with the banking. So our banking is in a real disarray and has been for a while. And it cracked in 2008, and it was just greed. It was just greed, right? They after September 11th, everything was down except for mortgage-backed securities, and so China and Saudi Arabia came to Fannie and Freddie and said, we want to buy all your assets. And Fannie and Freddie, well, we don't have enough assets for all your money. And they said, make more assets. So that's when they came out with the subprime, the Alt-A, the no income verification, no asset verification, all the different types of loans, okay, and they each had different kinds of yields, right? And then Alan Greenspan, you can look at what he did one of two ways. He either didn't like these adjustable rate mortgages, right, and so he raised the rates 14 times in quarter point for every month for 14 months, right? And then right when it was time for those option arms to hit their 13th month and recast, and then the payments went through the roof for the homeowners, and they did something that wasn't expected. They say it wasn't expected, but I believe the banks expected it, because that's why they bought all of those loans had default insurance, and the carrier for the default insurance was AIG. Okay, and so now AIG's got to put out all this money right? Because these banks insured those high-risk loans. So that was a boon for the banks, because they didn't just get what was left of the principal owed on these mortgages. They got back the full balance of the mortgage plus 30 years of interest. That's what they insured those loans for. And so they did things to cause people to have to go in default. They would sell those loans off, and you make your payments on time, but now you're late because your payment went to the old bank, but now it's being held by a new bank. So you'll get a 30-day late. By the time the old bank either sends a check back to you or sends it on to the new bank, right? And then they do that a couple times. Now you got 3 30-day lates, and none of it was your fault. And then those mortgage rates recast, right? And you tried to refinance, and they won't refinance. They wouldn't refinance people because they had 3 30-day lates. So people walked. All right. And that's how Tarp came into being, right? And those banks made a bunch of money on Tarp. Okay, the big banks bought up high-risk companies just so they could get Tarp. That's how Bank of America acquired Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch was a big player in these those mortgage-backed securities, the high-risk loans. Right now they're owned by Bank of America. And so I don't think, it depends on how smart you think Alan Green. If he's as smart as everybody thinks he is, he knew what he was doing, right? He wasn't that was, what he did was criminal, right? What those banks did was criminal, right? So people stopped trusting the banks, the big companies, the advisors that handled the pension funds and the hedge funds. They stopped trusting the banking system. And so what they did was, when they would put these funds that they're managing in the market, they chose the companies, that had the smart CEOs and the solid board of advisors and had the good supply chain management, marketing to the emerging markets, all of that. And but the main thing they looked for was low debt and lots of capital. And then, end of last year, beginning of this year, the Fed had to jump in to the repo market. And everybody thinks I'm talking about cars. Well, kind of, but it's that repo stands for repurchase operations. It's the overnight lending to banks. So big banks like Chase and Barclays, they lend overnight, charging low interest, like 1.5% or whatever, right? But overnight, that adds up. That can be significant, right? So they can have enough money to meet the Fed's reserve requirements. Well, they pulled out of the repo business, and the Fed had to jump in, and they put in more money than they put in during Tarp in 2008. And I was thinking that there was leftover toxic mortgage assets that they were concerned about, but those have already been pretty much, settled, resolved, diluted. And what it was China made an announcement that starting in January of this year, they were no longer going to buy internal combustion engine automobiles. And Ford, GM, and Chrysler announced that they were going to start making electric cars competing with Tesla. Okay, so these Chase, Barclays, these big banks, they were thinking that, okay, now that these the assets behind these loans on these used cars, these internal combustion engine automobiles, was gonna, go down, and people were gonna, the cars that weren't worth as much as people owed on them, and they were gonna do what they did with their houses. In 2008, they're gonna pull over along the side of the highway, put the keys up under the visor, and walk away. All right. So there's the trust in the banking system is almost nothing now because of how they do things, right? It's just, kind of interesting how they make up ways to make money. They make money on the velocity of money. Okay, so every transaction that you do, there's those little charges, and those little charges add up. Right? And that's how they make their money. And doing things like manipulating, like they did with the the subprime loans, right? You just stop trusting people. Here in the valley, there's a huge distrust for the institutional banks. Most of these Mexicans, they worked hard, saved their money under their mattress, and then they bought their property or their houses, and then or they get a private party note because they don't trust the institutions. And that's a cultural thing, because the Mexican government, in Mexico, so everything's centralized. They screw everybody over all the time, and so they just, it's ingrained that they lack a trust in the institutions, and that has an effect on what I do for a living. And it's that culture that's got to be broken, and in the education, which what I have to do is educate people on their finances, is a huge part of it, because people only know what they know, and what they know they don't like. All right. So back around to what's going on here in the valley. We've opened back up. They're not gonna, and they weren't gonna ever anyways. They're not gonna arrest you for not wearing a mask outside your house, right? But whether they let you in the gym or the grocery store without a mask, that's a different story. There is no law requiring you wear a mask. There is actually no crisis, no greater than the flu, the annual flu anyways, no greater than H1N1 was in 2009, which killed my father, right? This is a political crisis, right? But it's a greater crisis for people that they're obese. They haven't eaten right. They don't eat right and exercise, right? Like the judge that put down the lockdown order, right? He's at the high risk, right? A fluffy judge. All right. So that's my commentary for Sunday for today. All right, for the Rio Grande Valley. Have a good one. Ruben Lowen out.